There's a moment in One Piece, and if you've seen it, you already know exactly which one I mean, where every single person watching stopped breathing, not because of a power-up, not because of a transformation, not because of a flashy technique with a 10-syllable name. It was because of him. Monkey D. Luffy, at his absolute peak, did something that no character in anime history had ever quite done the same way. He didn't just win a fight. He didn't just become powerful. He became inevitable. But here's the question nobody actually stops to answer properly. How good was Prime Luffy? Not Gear 5 Luffy, not the meme, not the hype, the actual honest-to-God peak performance of this man. Because when you strip away the fandom, the merchandise, and the 1,000-episode runtime, the answer is either terrifying or everything you've been told is a lie. To understand how good Prime Luffy truly was, we need to start somewhere most people skip, the beginning. Because Luffy didn't start as a monster. He started as a joke, a rubber kid in a village that nobody cared about, who ate a devil fruit by accident and spent years being laughed at by pirates who'd seen real power. Even the man who inspired him, red-haired Shanks, one of the 4 emperors, didn't give Luffy a legendary power. He gave him a straw hat. Think about that. The greatest pirates in the world gave this kid a hat and said, "That's enough." And somehow, it was. But here's the thing. That rubber fruit everyone dismissed, the gum fruit, there was a reason the world government spent 800 years hiding the truth about it. A reason we'll come back to. Because first, let's talk about who Luffy had to become before he ever reached his prime. One Piece spans over 1,000 episodes, but Luffy's real growth, it doesn't happen on a training arc. It doesn't happen in a weighted gravity room. It happens in loss. Arlong broke him. Crocodile broke him. Twice. Rob Lucci nearly killed him. Kuma scattered his entire crew across the world. And then Marineford happened. The war to save Ace. Luffy ran through the greatest military force in the world. Admirals, warlords, marines with 30 years of combat experience. He ran through all of them. Not because he was the strongest. He absolutely wasn't. He ran through them because he was the only person there who was willing to die for what he wanted. But he still lost. Ace died. The crew was gone. Luffy broke in a way the show had never shown before. He didn't rage. He didn't power up. He just collapsed. And that moment, that devastating gut punch moment, is actually the most important thing that ever happened to Luffy's power ceiling. Because what came next changed everything. 2 years. Luffy spent 2 years alone on an island called Rusukaina, an island where 500 species of animals could kill him, training under Silver's Rayleigh, the first mate of the Pirate King himself. And what did Rayleigh teach him? Haki. Now, if you're newer to One Piece, here's what you need to understand about Haki, and why it matters more than any devil fruit in the series. Haki is willpower made physical. It's the human spirit manifested as a weapon, and it comes in 3 types. Armament Haki turns your body into iron. Observation Haki lets you see the future. And the rarest of all, Conqueror's Haki, the ability to dominate the will of others. Most people never develop Conqueror's Haki. You're born with it or you're not. Luffy had it since he was a child and didn't even know what it was. After Rusukaina, he didn't just have it. He began to wield it. But here's where the power scaling conversation gets genuinely interesting. Because the Haki Luffy used when he came back from training, that wasn't his ceiling. Not even close. His real ceiling didn't appear until he was backed into a corner with no way out. And that happened on an island called Wano. If you want to understand how good Prime Luffy was, you need to understand what Kaido represented. He wasn't just the strongest creature alive. He was the proof of concept that willpower alone isn't enough. He beat Luffy in their first fight. One hit, and Luffy hit the ground like a rag doll. Then Kaido beat him again, and again, and again. 4 times Luffy lost to this man. 4 times he got back up. And then, in the ocean of Luffy's own unconsciousness, between life and death, something unlocked. He discovered advanced Conqueror's Haki, the ability to code his attacks in the rarest force in the world. The same technique only a handful of people in history had ever mastered. Roger, Whitebeard, Rayleigh, Legends, and Luffy figured it out by dying. The fight shifted. Kaido, a man who had never shown pain, who had survived everything the world threw at him, who wanted to die and couldn't, started bleeding. Not from weapons, from fists. Luffy's rubber fists were drawing blood from the strongest creature alive. But even then, that still wasn't Prime Luffy's final form. Because the world government's secret, the one they hid for 800 years, it was about to walk onto the roof of Onigashima and laugh. The gum fruit was never the gum fruit. For 800 years, the world government hunted it, classified it, hid its true name from history. Because its real name is the human fruit. Model Nika. Nika, the sun god. A mythical figure that ancient people prayed to for freedom. And its power isn't rubber. Its power is fiction made real. Gear 5. Luffy doesn't fight like a martial artist. He fights like a cartoon character. The environment bends to his imagination. He can make the ground rubber. He can make the lightning rubber. He turned a giant island cloud into a ball and bounced it. Kaido, the strongest creature on Earth, said out loud that he had never had so much fun in a fight. And Luffy laughed. Not smirked. Not grinned. Laughed. In the middle of the most consequential battle of his life. That laugh, that ridiculous, free, uncontainable laugh, is the most accurate representation of what Prime Luffy actually is. He's not a weapon. He's not a conqueror. He's freedom wearing a straw hat. But okay, we've talked about what he became. We've talked about how he got there. Now let's answer the actual actual question. How good was he? Objectively, honestly, where does Prime Luffy actually rank? Here's the honest answer, and it's one even the most hardcore fans argue about. In terms of raw destructive capability, Prime Luffy sits comfortably in a tier occupied by fewer than 10 characters in the entire series. We're talking Shanks, Blackbeard, Akainu Imu level conversation. He defeated Kaido, a man who had never lost a one-on-one fight, a man who survived execution 7 times, a man whose body was literally used as a diplomatic weapon because no country would dare harm him. Luffy beat him, alone, on a roof, after losing 4 times. That alone puts him in the conversation for one of the most impressive combat records in manga history. But here's what the power-scaling community often misses. Luffy's real power was never about the numbers. Every major opponent Luffy defeated, Crocodile, Lochi, Doflamingo, Katakuri, Kaido, they all had something in common. They all believed the world was fixed. That strength meant control, that people were tools. And Luffy beat every single one of them, not just with fists, but with the refusal to accept their version of reality. That's what Gear 5 literally is. Reality bending to his will. The world government feared the Nika fruit for 800 years because a man who can make freedom physical cannot be controlled, cannot be contained, and cannot be predicted. Prime Luffy isn't just strong. He's the strongest argument the story makes for why spirit matters more than system. And if that sounds like a narrative point more than a power scaling point, good, because that's exactly what Eiichiro Oda intended. He didn't write a power fantasy. He wrote a philosophy. And Luffy at his prime is that philosophy, walking, laughing, and punching emperors in the face. So how good was Prime Monkey D. Luffy? Good enough to beat the unbeatable, good enough to make legends bleed, good enough to carry a 25-year story on his shoulders without ever losing what made him. Shanks gave him a straw hat and said, "That's enough." Turns out, he was right. If you want to see us break down where Luffy ranks against the Final Saga's top tiers, or dive into whether Gear 5 is actually the most broken ability in anime, hit subscribe and drop it in the comments. The ocean's still out there, and so is the next video. 2 years. Luffy spent 2 years alone on an island called Rusukaina, an island where what did Rayleigh teach him? Haki. Now, if you're newer to One Piece, here's what you need to understand about Haki, and why it matters more than any devil fruit in the series. Haki is willpower made physical. It's the human spirit manifested as a weapon. He didn't just have it, he began to wield it. But here's where the power scaling conversation gets genuinely interesting, because the Haki ever mastered. Roger, Whitebeard, Rayleigh, Legends, and Luffy figured it out by dying. The fight shifted. Kaido, a man who had never shown pain, who had survived everything the world threw at him, who wanted to die and couldn't, started bleeding. Not from weapons, from fists. Luffy's rubber fist name is the human fruit. Model Nika. Nika, the sun god. A mythical figure that ancient people prayed to for freedom. And its power isn't rubber. Its power is fiction made. Talking Shanks, Blackbeard, Akainu Imu level conversation. He defeated Kaido, a man who had never lost a one-on-one. Think about that. The greatest pirates in the world gave this kid a hat and said, "That's enough." And somehow, it was.